All right, let's take a look at interrupts and how we can connect an external event like a button press to trigger a function in software. So we're going to start, as always, by creating a new project. Let's call it interrupt. And let's create first a button. So let's look for a pin. So an input pin. And let's also put an interrupt. I'm going to go ahead and leave the interrupt type as auto, and we'll call this pressed IRQ for interrupt request. Now, as always, we need to assign the correct pin. As we know, button is pin 04. So I'll go ahead and connect that. What we will also have to do is configure the interrupt so that it's enabled for the ARM Cortex-M0. Let's disable it for the M4. Great, so our schematics are done. Let's go ahead and build. Now we actually need to look at the software side. So we're going to open main for the Cortex-M0. So how about let's start by creating the service routine first. So let's make void pressed handler. And we're going to use just the ARM command for clearing the interrupt request. So NVIC. And the purpose of this is so that the interrupt doesn't keep calling itself. This is clearing the flag that says that that interrupt was processed. Pressed IRQ CFG dot interrupt source. Great, so we have our interrupt service routine. We clear the flag on the interrupt so it doesn't keep getting called. And let's go ahead and initialize. Int init and the name of our interrupt service routine. Now the last thing we have to do is we actually have to enable that interrupt on the ARM. So that's NVIC, enable IRQ. Pressed IRQ, CFG, interrupt source. Great, let's go ahead and build to make sure there's no errors. Everything looks fine, so I'm going to test this using the debugger actually. So go ahead and click on debug. And I'm going to set a breakpoint for inside of the interrupt service routine. That way when I press the button, we'll see if it actually gets triggered. So right now we're paused here. I'm going to go ahead and press play. And I'm going to go ahead and click the button. Nice. So you can see that the interrupt was triggered from the button press, which we then connected through this sysint init function. We enabled the interrupt. Now we came into the press handler and we are about to clear the interrupt. So I'm going to press play. Great, it was cleared, so this wasn't continuously called. If I go ahead and press the button one more time, yeah, gets called again. Now, interrupt service routines are useful for things like catching events. Button presses are one type of event, but you can also have things like watchdog timers. You can have actual timer counters that may do a countdown and then trigger an interrupt after a certain amount of minutes. Some sensors have things like shake detection and orientation detection, which can then, say, wake up the arm cortex to do something. Basically, an interrupt is typically it's used for connecting the outside world and getting the CPU to wake up and do something useful.